Hello everyone, this is Professor Hasselman, and this is History 107, and today we're going to be talking about modernization and nationalism. Now, developments in the long 19th century divided societies around the world in many ways. The deepest division pitted Western Europe and a few other wealthy societies, such as the United States, against most of the rest of the world, where economic conditions were deteriorating. In 1800, for example, the average Mexican had a standard of living two-thirds the level of the U.S. counterpart. In 1900, the ratio stood at one-third as a result of U.S. gains and Mexican losses. But there were other rifts as well. Some regions were held as colonies, the treatment of which varied greatly. And for all the divisions, however, there were also a few common trends as societies attempted to respond to Western pressure and example. With a great deal of caution, some of these trends can be seen as the first signs of a global modernization process. Three areas warrant particular attention: changes in the military, public health, and education. Another common trend, though by definition a complicated one, involved the thread of nationalism. European in origin, nationalism met a variety of needs in most regions of the world, becoming a significant new political force by 1900. Figuring out what nationalism meant and how it could vary, for example, between reformism and conservatism is a crucial analytical task for modern world history. We will discuss new divisions in world history during the long 19th century, some common trends that cut across these divisions, and the spread of nationalism. Now, we've already noted the important division that opened up in the long 19th century between industrialized societies and agricultural societies. We can also point to a division between societies held as colonies and those that remained free. While India was held as a colony, China, technically independent, was increasingly subject to European territorial seizures and exploitation. Even among colonies, however, we find differences. India fared better under imperialism in the long 19th century than Africa did. Africa was divided among competing European states in a race to exploit its territories and resources. Along with differential economic change and differential imperialism came the realization of the need for certain reforms. Some societies realized that aspects of Western development would need to be imitated if they were to gain enough strength to establish or retain independence in a world dominated by European political control and the control of the industrial zone. Modernization theory, the brainchild of American sociologists in the 1950s, argues that as societies realize the directions of modern industrial political states, they begin to change a number of aspects of social activity and parallel directions. According to this theory, societies will begin to move in the same basic directions and connections will be seen among developments in intellectual life, family life, and political life. Economic modernization means that societies will become or will try to become industrialized. Political modernization means that governments will take on new functions, shed older functions, and create larger bureaucracies. The result is the creation of a new kind of state whose operation parallels the modernization of the economy. As culture is modernized, science will be emphasized. Modernization can even apply to aspects of family life, where it might involve, for example, reduction of the birth rate. Now, modernization theory is widely assumed in certain kinds of scholarship, but also has severe limitations. Critics argue that looking for a single direction in world history in the modern period oversimplifies very complicated patterns, even within single societies. The theory also risks denigrating societies that seem to be slow in the modernization process. Modernization theory does not apply to many areas of social life. It doesn't predict, for example, trends in religion, crime rates, or the status of women. Now, finally, modernization must be distinguished from mere westernization. Now, at the end of the long 19th century and in the early 20th century, we find common trends in three broad areas: public health, education, and the military, in virtually every major society in the world. Borrowing from Western sanitary ideas in engineering, many societies realized that governments needed to take responsibility for public health measures, which would result in healthier and more rapidly growing population, sources of economic and military strength. Modern public health measures were born in Western Europe in the 1830s and 1840s and spread to the United States, Japan, Latin America, and elsewhere. Public health became a concern in the urban sectors of virtually every part of the world by the end of the 19th century, setting the stage for the huge global population increase of the 20th century. By 1900, virtually every society in the world was also attempting to spread schooling to some sectors of the lower classes and to add technical and scientific subjects to the educational agenda. Now, this might be a massive effort, as in the West or Japan, where by the 1890s, virtually every child of appropriate age was in school. Much more gradually, colonial authorities in India and Africa began to allow some access to education, sometimes assisted by missionary efforts. China would expand its attention to student life by the 1890s, sending students to learn from such societies as Japan, the United States, and Western Europe. Recognizing the now more ominous power position of the West, societies looked to improve military technology and copy Western military training and officer organization. Even colonies enhanced the training of troops to provide more effective fighting forces. Another phenomenon that spread widely in the 19th century was the rise of nationalism and nationalist loyalties. Nationalism is the belief that a society has an identifiable national culture that is measurably different from other cultures. Cultural nationalists often assert that their nation's culture is better than others and may believe that the church should be connected to the state. Nationalists typically argue that recognizable divisions exist among peoples based on different national traditions. Nationalism is a mostly modern phenomenon that contrasts with the traditional types of loyalty to religion or locality. Nationalism was born in Europe on the basis of two factors. Nationalism was an objection to Enlightenment thinking that argued that all peoples were fundamentally the same. An increased population movement and the rise of the new middle class created an audience for loyalty to an entity that was larger than the locality and would help uprooted peoples in the city find a sense of identity. Nationalism received a significant boost from the French Revolution by tearing down local institutions and reducing the power of the church. The French Revolution resulted in the idea that the government belonged to the people, who now owed it loyalty. From Western and Central Europe, nationalism quickly spread in two additional directions, visibly by the late 18th and early 19th century. It spread to the Americas, becoming more distinct after the American Revolution, and to Eastern Europe. In the Americas, nationalism was primarily used to form new states or to undergird new states and identities. In Eastern Europe, nationalism became a force to attack multinational empires. Nationalism spread to the Middle East by the middle of the 19th century and to India by the 1880s. From the 1860s to 1900, we see nationalist elements in Japan, Russia, Turkey, and Africa. In other words, from the 1750s to 1914, nationalism was effectively created and gained some attention in virtually every part of the world. So, what were the implications of nationalism? As we saw in Europe, nationalism provided new loyalties for people who were facing rapid economic and political change. Further, nationalism provided alternatives to traditional loyalties, particularly with regard to religion. Nationalism helped people entertain the possibility of a certain degree of change, while insisting that change had to be modified or controlled by attachment to tradition. Nationalists may also argue that in order to express national strength, certain kinds of changes are needed, such as more attention to industrial development, or even changes in styles of dress to appear more businesslike. Hence, it could link directly to modernization. Now, nationalism was an increasingly important rallying point for many peoples around the world against the West. National loyalties united people across traditional boundaries of class, caste, or even gender. So this is the end of today's lecture on modernization and nationalism. Again, History 107.